Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tim Sullivan, our Chief Advisory Officer here at Zonda. I will be joined very briefly by Mollie Carmichael, one of our principals and a longtime friend of mine. Wanted to let you know we've got some really fascinating stuff happening today. We're going to walk you through some amazing elements, some stuff that's going on with the world of master plan communities, but very importantly, there is a builder slant to it today because we're going to talk about the top 10 builders from 2023, and we're going to talk about the factors of how they did what they did. As you can see from our agenda, we're going to talk about the geographic impacts. We'll talk about the top 5 builders' growth factors, also top 10 builders by region and future supply and road ahead. And what Mollie and I really want you to know is that we can help you grow. The whole concept here is to kind of dissect what the builders are doing in the markets they're in and to give you some insights. And we're able to help you go deeper and deeper into the world of the consumer and segmenting product. I'd like to give a massive shout out to Titan, who is our sponsor today. Drywall adhesive, and it bonds to drywall and studs. And importantly, it prevents the screw pops. And learn more at titan.com/US. Note that they've got some unbelievably strong products. They've got the universal fast track adhesive, the solvent-free and foam safe. And then once again, learn more at their website. Thank you, Titan team. We appreciate you being with us today. Now, we're less than 2 weeks away from Builder 100. And just before we kick this off, we were talking to our marketing team about the fact that I think we're 2 or 3 tickets from selling out. We should have close to 500 people attending. It'll be at the Ritz-Carlton, Laguna de Gal. It is a terrific program. We go high, we go low, we go deep, we go wide, and we'd love to have you join us if you're not there, not planning on it yet. We continue to push the envelope for data, and Enterprise is really our platform. And now we've moved it into the iPad, and it's really the element that's tailored for market analysis and specific site reports. Get any of the economic and housing data you need. And remember, it's real time because we are updating some of this information daily. And to keep a pulse on the active shift, Mollie and I are joined by some incredibly smart people. Ali Wolf is there, of course, our BPM team, Matt and Todd, the one and only Kimberly Byram, who looks over our multifamily practice. We have a very deep group, and we're here to help. Livable, of course, is with New Home Source. It's the coolest innovative listing and digital solution. And reach out to us about this because this whole setup is a fantastic way to sell more homes. And if you're interested in some free data, all you've got to do is use that URL. Just do a little snapshot right there. Request your market right now. We'll give you a free one. You get an idea about what is in our information. And it can be any market that we cover. There's 65 for you to choose from. We also have a new published data, a published research product called National Outlook. You see Ali right there. And the concept here is to try to give, from an economic and demographic standpoint, a forward look into the housing markets and identifying shifting trends. Please reach out to us if you're interested. It is a subscription process. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts because today we're going to go through just that different slant because we're going to make this builder-centric. And there's probably no one better, not just in Zonda, but I think on the planet, to be digging into this. And of course, I'm talking about Mollie Carmichael, our principal. But there's a backup here because Mollie has been a home builder. She's been a land developer. She's been a consultant for many years. And she's a mom. And by the way, that's an important factor to truly be able to multitask and get all of this information together. But importantly, she'll drive the bus today as we talk about these products. She and I will have a conversation about certain tactics that are very important for you to note. And notice that we'll end with the future supply and road ahead. So Mollie, if you would, please step on in and take the virtual stage.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks everyone for joining us. So as we approach Builder 100 in 2 weeks, we thought, what better webinar to give you guys than who really won it for 2023. So we're going to talk through the top 10. We'll talk about how they got there, and we're going to go through some of those growth factors as well. So let's dive right in. So I feel like there should be a drum roll to this, but we now officially have all of the top 10 builders. We actually have 100, but we're going to highlight the top 10. And again, We'll do a deeper dive on the top 5 for the country, and then we're going to go into by region how they got there as well. So D.R. Horton takes it again with Lennar as number 2, and then Pulte, NVR, Meritage Homes, KB Home, Taylor Morrison, Clayton Properties. And as you can see, all of those held their same positions for those first 8. That's what those yellow arrows mean. Toll Brothers climbs up to number 9. You're going to see some interesting things to Toll Brothers. And then Century drops down 1. So these are your top 10. Now let's dive in and look at those a little bit more specifically. But before we do that, I want to hit just a couple of key factors that I think are interesting as we look at the geographic and demographic piece to this, because it does influence who wins, where they go, what they do. So just some real quick slides here. Overall, when we look at household growth, it really does kind of hover over about the same average looking back. That's not the unique part. So on average, that looks the same. But when we look at population is falling. And we're also seeing a pretty big shift away from what we've seen as traditional family and far more single households, or non-family households is a better way to look at it. So population's on the decline, household growth is still staying steady. So that's an interesting implication, I think, for the future and sort of where we focus. You'll see where that matters. As we look at it by region, it's also interesting to look at the overall population growth for Florida and Texas is almost 4 times the growth compared to most of the other regions. The Southeast is the closest in number 3. But if you compare the growth for Florida and Texas, look at it by comparison to some of the others. So significant growth as you look to those 2 markets. And again, you'll see the relationship with the builders. When we look at overall per state, if we go to the West, you'll see Idaho and Utah, certainly Salt Lake, they win certainly in that category. South Dakota is really the anomaly in the Midwest. We've seen, a lot of hints there, but I don't see a lot of builders really gravitating or going to that market. It's more Chicago, Minnesota, Indiana. As we go to the Southeast, I mean, it's a pretty large group of them. So the Carolinas for retirement reasons, Florida, retirement reasons, Georgia, affordability, it's kind of a back office to the Northeast. Texas, certainly huge growth. You'll also see some interesting things between Texas, Florida, Tennessee, some of these markets where you have no income tax. That's another big trend on this. But again, simply just affordability. So let's dive in. We're going to now sort of dissect a little bit more granular those top 5. And I love this stuff. Like, it's so interesting when you really look at sort of what this all means. The top 3 key factors for the top 10, again, target highest growth markets and diversify by location. Target the highest demand markets with affordable home solutions. You'll see that too for sure. And diversity with product and lifestyle. So Pulte, for example, has their Del Webb component in addition to all the conventional products and so forth there. The other interesting anomaly, look at the difference in price for number 3, Pulte's average closing price versus Lennar and D.R. Horton. So they dropped dramatically in project count and closings, but they're also going for a much higher price point. Toll Brothers at number 9 is substantially higher, almost 3 times higher than number 1, but they're still at number 9, and they're still doing really well with their overall closings and total project count. And again, as you saw this year, they climbed up 1 notch. If we look at the overall average of their home sizes, really the top 10 are in that 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. When we look at our consumer research, it continues to point into that 1,500 to 2,500 square feet as the really key sizes, and obviously affordability follows that. When we look at it geographically, Florida and Texas represent 62% of the closings for those top 10. So that's pretty significant. Again, we saw that as far as like where all the growth is going. Well, the builders are going to absolutely the right locations. So again, Texas and Florida, and then followed, of course, by the Southeast. It makes total sense. And still in markets where we're losing population, builders like Lennar are doing well in California. And again, that becomes higher pressure on demand and higher pressure on demand and higher pressure on pricing. So when we go over to the top builders by region, Horton takes it with with 5 of the 8 regions, right? So you can see they dominate largely Florida, the Southeast altogether, Texas, the Midwest, certainly the Southwest. And then Lennar takes it for California, and then of course the Northwest. And NBR, they only play on the East, and so you'll see that NBR is there on the Northeast for sure. Now, when we look at sort of the different price points and really for those that are really kind of winning it within those regions, you'll actually see the overall price relationship. So let's just take the Midwest, for example, talk about the disparity there. You've got Toll Brothers as an average for the top 10. They're at the high at $727 and the lowest average price point for Century at $270. In the Northwest, you've got Lennar as the low at $560 and Pulte averaging $1,034,000. So again, if they want to increase market share, you can look at sort of how that might influence it as it relates to price and affordability. And of course, absorption will follow. Looking at the Southwest, Toll Brothers on the high end at $978, D.R. Horton at the low. And as you look to all of these regions, it's interesting that Century actually takes the lowest price point in the top 10 for 4 of those regions. Horton takes the low for 3 of those regions. Lennar is only 1. And then on the high end, Toll Brothers is the highest price point in the top 10 builders across all of those regions, except for the Northwest, and that's Pulte. As we look at the overall sales absorptions, Horton wins the West. So California, Southwest, Texas, Northwest, and then NBR, there's not a ton of activity in the Midwest. And I think that could and should change, but NBR certainly wins it there. And there's some opportunity for them that we'll talk a little bit about. And certainly in the Northeast and the Southeast, and of course, Florida, look at those absorptions, very, very strong for 2023. So let's dive in by builder. We're going to look just at D.R. Horton. They're 14% of the market share with 84,917 closings. Now, they had just over 5,000 homes that actually were single family for rent as part of those closings, but they still would have made it number 1 if they had not, included the single family for rent. But look at where they're at. So they're close to 90% detached. Overall, again, mostly detached, but an overall average closing price under $400,000. They're well diversified location-wise, so you can see that they're in all of the primary markets that all of the builders are in. And again, delivering affordable detached product where the highest demand is in every market. So again, they have a significant project count in Texas, Southeast, and Florida. When we look at it by price point, again, it's that under $400,000 price point that really makes it for them, unless they're in those more expensive markets like California, and again, Northeast and Northwest, those select very high price markets. That's where they push into, again, still very high demand in those price points, and harder to play too, for sure. So when we look at it by product type, you can see they do have quite a few attached products. I think some of the things that are unique for them is how much attached they have in Chicago, and look at how much attached they have actually in Utah. So we'll actually see a couple of those products as we go through this, but overall, largely detached throughout the country. Lennar, a little over 72,000 homes as far as closings go. They're 11.5% of the total market share last year. Again, all of those key markets across the country. Now they're a little bit more attached, so they drop down to 79% detached. Their ASP actually jumps up to $479, so still under that $500,000 price point. You're going to see a lot of the average home sizes too are in about that 2,000 square feet. I always want to point out, imagine if home sizes came down and prices got more affordable for some of these builders. I think they'd pick up a lot more market share. They have a huge presence in California, Texas, and Florida. That's really where their primary markets are. And from a price point perspective, when you compare this to Horton, they're a lot more diversified. So you have a lot more diversification in price point. In Florida, again, particularly in markets like Las Vegas, Phoenix, Denver, even in Salt Lake. Now, when we look at that as far as overall product types go, you also can see a lot more attached starting to pop up for Lennar as well in comparison to D.R. Horton. I think what's most unique for Lennar is the California markets, and they actually win for top closings in the California markets with a lot more attached. And if you look at the diversity, particularly in Southern California, it's almost half of their closings are actually in the attached category, and that helps keep their closings very high. When you combine D.R. Horton and Lennar together alone of the entire market, they make up 25% of the total market share. That's pretty staggering. Now, when we jump to PulteGroup, again, we go from that roughly 12% down to 4.5% at number 3. We're at 28,603 closings, and that's with Pulte and Del Webb combined together. Overall, when you looked at, they're mostly back to the all detached share, so much more detached. Overall closing price, though, this is really interesting. Their overall closing price is much larger when you compare that to Lennar or D.R. Horton. They're almost 2 times Horton's price point, so that's really interesting. You can see a lot more diversity, particularly the price points in Florida tend to be much more in the higher price points, and certainly in other markets like Denver, the Northwest, as we saw in some of the previous slides. So I think there's room for more price diversity by market for Pulte for sure. And when we look at overall the disparity by product type, they're all attached in the Northeast, and there's certainly a lot more room to do detached up there for sure. And as we look at the overall diversity, they're largely detached, as you saw, 89% throughout the whole country as it relates to their closings. Now MVR, so they're close to number 3. So Pulte is just over 4, NVR is just over 3. They do a little over 20,000 closings per year. But the interesting thing with NVR is they're all to the east. So yes, they are in the Midwest, but only in Chicago, Indiana, Ohio, and as we move into the Southeast, you've got Tennessee, the Carolinas, and so forth. But largely, again, moving to the east, they have a lot of room to grow if they wanted to actually come to other parts of the country, and doing very well in that very concentrated location. So the biggest difference with MVR is their percentage of attached. So they're 40% attached or 60% detached. And overall, you can see their overall pricing at $454,880. They do lean to the higher, bigger, more affordable locations and larger lot sizes when they actually go to detach, with an average almost at 8,000. And you'll see many of the others are smaller for their detached products. I do think that if they're going to play in the Midwest, they could go to Minneapolis very easily and compete there. The other top 10 are there. The other place I think they could play into is doing a lot more on the western coast of Florida, just given where their operations are for growth. When we look at the overall price point, as you can see, I mean, it's largely price points under 500,000. And that's really where the Ryan portion of the NVR model really plays super well. They also, again, as we talked about from a product perspective, they have a lot of attached, and attached is really simple to build on the East Coast. It's less expensive to build, and that's how you get to those affordable price points. And of course, that's where the highest demand is, and you get more volume. That pushes you far more into the top 10. Now let's look at Meritage. So we dropped from NVR in the 3s. Now we're at 2.2% market share, or close to 14,000 total closings last year. Overall, you can see, it's literally southern states only. So we've got, again, largely detached market share in those mid-4s. Now you'll notice their lot sizes for their detached product are a little bit smaller. Frankly, I think that's smarter. You can get to more affordable price points, more lots, more unit count. You don't have to do as much acquisition if you're buying smaller lots, but I think it's hard for all of these guys to stay in the top 10 for sure. They definitely have, if they're in Phoenix, they could easily have an operation in Las Vegas, very similar consumer groups, product types, things like that. So something to think about for them. And same thing for Utah. Seems logical. It's the next path for growth for them. As we look at the overall price points for them, they're largely in that 500,000 and below, except for the markets that are harder to compete in, like Denver and the California markets. They do push up a little bit in the Atlanta market, so a lot more diversified and really mostly that one market only. And I think some of that has to do with some of the builder acquisitions they've done and things like that, but overall, largely under $500,000 in price. As we look at overall product type, again, they're largely detached, but you can see some of that diversification. They have more of their attached products in the least affordable markets like Southern California, and it's a lot more pressure on product diversity and affordability in the Denver market. It's challenging to make attached work in Denver, so I commend them for going there. But overall, much more in the detached world. Now let's look at the top 10 builders by region. I'm going to show you a slide that it's a lot on a page, but we're going to go through each region and we'll just focus on the top 3. So if you're wondering where they all rank by region, you can see each one of those regions that we just talked about here. And you'll actually see, and we're going to focus largely on those top 3, and we're going to dive into each region. So again, we sell this product. We can get into the weeds for you guys on builder strategies and things like that. So please reach out to us. We'd love to help you there. But I'm going to dive into those regions. I'm going to go a little bit faster here so that you guys know we have this kind of detail. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have so much more detail than this. But I'm like giddy when I look at this data. So overall, when we look at California, Lennar actually wins it for California. So they're number 1. D.R. Horton takes the backseat, number 2 for the first time, and that's in California. And then Pulte is number 6. KB is actually number 3. And then Meritage is number 4, followed by Taylor Morrison at number 5. If you look at the overall market share and closing prices, what does it take to play in California? So again, to be number 1, Lennar is almost 25% of the market share, and the average price point is $740,000. You've got Toll Brothers down there at number 7, and they're the highest price point by a long shot at $1.7 million. When you look at overall migration, like where should the closing activity be going? Where would you focus? When you look at most of the growth in the Bay Area, you're going into the Central Valley or San Joaquin and some of those areas, right? And then in Southern California, of course, it's the Inland Empire. And so it's those affordable areas that people are either going to migrate to or they have to leave the state. And we're losing close to 500,000 people to other states today. And hopefully that will slow down. And the only way we can slow that down is with new affordable housing solutions. So when we look at Lennar very specifically, you can see those markets that are where the migration is going to, it's where they're at. So Inland Empire is a big part of that. They're doing really well in the coastal counties, but if you remember, that's because that's where they're actually bringing in attached products and playing in categories that maybe some others aren't. Same thing in the Bay Area. D.R. Horton isn't. They're staying away largely from the coastal areas and really pushing inland to where they can get volume, where the demand is the highest and where that migration is moving. Look at that streak straight through the middle of California. And then KB Home, very diversified throughout, but again, playing in very specific locations where they play best. When we look at overall average price points and we look at all 3 of them together, look at Southern California. Look at the number of communities that are selling over 4 a month in Southern California. That's staggering given the price points that we just looked at and the price points that you can see over there to the left. As you look to Northern California, all of that purple, blue, and black, those are all over $700,000 in price. Again, those absorptions aren't quite as staggering as Southern California. So you see more of those. Best selling, of course, is in purple and blue. Oh, sorry about that. Overall, when you look at Horton, you'll see that they're primarily concentrated in the affordable inland markets. And of course, KB Home, geographically diverse in California for the most part, but prices largely $400,000 to over $800,000. The top selling project in all of California, again, I feel like this should be a drum roll. It's D.R. Horton and it's Augusta at the Fairways. It's, again, right at the heart of what the customer wants. A large lot, California is a 5,000 square foot lot, and it's 1,500 to 2,600 square feet in the 500,000s, and they're selling close to 10 a month. Crazy. But you know what? It's very cute, affordable, works great for California. Now let's look at Florida. So we've got Horton, Lennar, Pulte, NVR, and Meritage. I'm sorry, we have D.R. Horton, Lennar, Pulte, and then it goes to Taylor Morrison, and then KB Home in the top 5. So when we look at what does it take? So again, to be number 1, Horton's 19% of the market share, Lennar's 16% of the market share, then Lennar, and then it falls off heavily from there. So again, being in those lower price points, as we look at Horton, anything under that $400,000 price point in Florida, that's where your top builders are falling into, except for Pulte in the top 5. Toll Brothers continues to be the anomaly with the highest price points. When you look at where the growth is for Florida, of course, it pushes right into the middle. That's where the land is less expensive, where it's more affordable. It's why the Villages continues to be the top selling master plan throughout the US, because it's an affordable place to retire. It's where all the growth is going to. And it's a great example of why studying these migration maps is so important. And so when we look at where those top builders are, you can see all of those builders together where they're hugging the coast, east, west, and of course, the very central locations where land is inexpensive and people can retire much more affordably. So you'll see number 1 with D.R. Horton. Lennar actually has more project count, but they're at number 2, and then Pulte Group right there. Overall, when you look at D.R. Horton, they're selling about 4 a month. The most common communities in Florida are sub $400,000 in price point. You can kind of see that here geographically, but look at their absorptions on the right. I mean, anything with blue and purple is 4 and over for sales rate. So they're killing it from a sales absorption perspective. When we look at Lennar, look to the right, you can see those absorptions drop a little bit, but still killing it with, a lot of blue and purple to the right. Price points, again, below the 400,000 works in Florida. Last but not least, Pulte, much more diversified in price point, which I'm a huge fan of diversity when it comes to segmentation and overall risk portfolio. So I think that's very positive. But the absorptions start to slow as a result. So you see a lot more green and yellow to the right, which are sales absorptions in the 3 to 2 a month. Top selling project, again, drum roll here. It's D.R. Horton once again. They're selling 18 to 19 per month. Again, right in the sweet spot, 1,500 square feet. And I would bet most of their absorptions go up to about 2,500 square feet. They've got a couple of different lot sizes here that may be influencing why they're coming in as number 1. Now let's go to the Midwest. The top 3 here are Horton, Lennar, and Pulte. And again, this is where NVR starts to play and come in more prominently. And then you'll see some of those other top 10 don't show up in the Midwest. And the Midwest, I think it's one of the best kept secrets and opportunities for builders that want to grow. When we look at overall, again, what does it take? D.R. Horton and Lennar represent about a little over 15% of the total market share. And this is where Pulte is much closer. Again, they have all 3 of those sitting in Minnesota, where NVR is not in Minnesota and has an opportunity. And you'll start to see sort of how that plays out. Once again, Toll Brothers at the top for price point. But really to play in these markets, it's sub $400,000 price points. Once again, Pulte's the anomaly in slightly higher price points with an average of $539. Overall population and migration growth here, kind of where people are actually going. You can see some of that growth certainly in the Minnesota markets, not as much in Chicago, but that population's already there. And you've got some opportunities throughout the region there as well. Overall, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, and Chicago MSAs really are the top locations for where those closings are happening for those top 3 builders that we're looking at here. And you can see where that growth is. And we'll look at really from a sales rate perspective and price perspective. You'll see it's sub $400,000 price points really to be successful here. More of it in the Minneapolis area. are you pushing into more diverse price points up to the $700,000 price points on average? Overall sales absorptions, again, it shifts as those price points shift. So the more affordable, the more active, and the more successful your sales absorptions are. Overall for Lennar, you can see their overall price points and absorptions. They're killing it in the Indiana area. You can see all the purple and blue there. They're doing great in Chicago. And as you go over to Minnesota, sales absorption still in the 2 to 3 a month, but a lot more diversity as well from a price point perspective. Pulte, as you look to the right, you'll see more in the green and the blue. And then you'll see the disparity in price points there to the left, largely sub $500,000 for Pulte. Again, we're pushing into those higher price points compared to the other top builders in a lot of these different markets. Top selling project in the Midwest, it's actually Ryan Homes, and they didn't fall into the top 3, but Ryan builds a great home, super efficient, very attractive. I think they do a really good job aesthetically, cost-wise, and they always tend to be one of the best sellers in the market. It's hard to compete when Ryan's next door to you. Let's go to the Northeast. So the top 3 here, NVR is #1 here, then Lennar, then D.R. Horton. As we look at the comparison, what does it take? NVR represents about 1/4 of the overall market share here in the Northeast. And a lot of it is attached product. They do it well, they do it efficiently, and it looks good and it lives well. You'll see Lennar there at #2 and Horton right on their tail at 6.6%. And you can see overall with a price point for NVR, you know, it's a much higher price point here. So it's really under $600,000 to compete and be really successful here. Let's look at where the growth is in the Northeast. And again, you know, the New York area and some of those areas, it looks like California, they're actually losing population. And then we're seeing that growth move to really more of the Southeast or even into some of the other areas. We're seeing some interesting growth even into markets like Maine, which I think is super interesting. Beautiful state. But overall, a little bit more challenging as we look to migration and population growth. Overall, when we look to overall projects, you can see all 3 of these together. DC has 1/4 of the projects for the top 3 builders. And then Philadelphia is actually #2 with 19%. But you can see it's very concentrated in those states right there in and around the DC area. Overall NVR, again, super affordable. Look at all of the green and the yellow here. Certainly there are some blue, purple, and black in the higher price points, but largely in the under $600,000 price points. But look at their absorptions go. I mean, all that blue and purple, they are really doing fantastic in those markets. For Lennar, again, you'll see more diversity in price point, full ranges from, again, over 800,000 all the way down to, you know, the $400,000 price points. And you'll see their absorption sort of tie accordingly. Some great locations though, because even at some of the higher price points, they're doing very, very well. D.R. Horton, largely in the more affordable price points, you'll see them in the 600, sub 600 and below. And overall, interestingly enough, their absorptions aren't nearly as strong in the Northeast market by comparison to some of their other markets. So they have a lot more yellow on their absorptions by month in compared to their other regions. Top selling project in the Northeast, again, very cute, very traditional for this market. You've got D.R. Horton, 7,000 square foot lot, right in the heart. Once again, 1,900 to 2,500 square feet. And it's just under, let's call it $550,000 in price. Look at those absorptions, close to 17 a month for this project. Now let's go to the Northwest. #1, Lennar. #2, D.R. Horton. And #3, Toll Brothers makes it to the top 3 for this market. Now this is a really tough market to play in. A lot of jurisdictional issues, really hard to develop, all kinds of entitlement challenges. So when you look at the top 10 here, they are really performing and slugging it through. So #1, as we mentioned, Lennar, #2, D.R. Horton and Toll Brothers. And how do you play here? Lennar is playing a price play for sure here. They're the lowest of the top 10 here, followed by Horton, which is the 3rd lowest of the top 10 here. And then certainly looking at at Toll Brothers, they're number 2. The number 1 price point here is Pulte, and that's got to be tough to play in it, which is why they're down there at number 8. So when we look at where the growth is in this market, there's a lot of growth moving to areas like Montana. Again, we saw some of the growth for Idaho. It's one of the fastest selling states in the West for sure. Idaho and certainly Utah are the 2 fastest selling states in the West. So something to think about as you're looking at growth. When we look at where the top 10 builders are, and we're just going to focus on the top 3 here, you can see there's a lot of activity in and around Seattle. Certainly a lot of different growth in the Oregon area and certainly Boise. And let's look at their price points and their absorptions. Again, I commended these builders for getting these kinds of absorptions in the Seattle area. So you're seeing Lennar largely in the purple as you look to the right, and overall price points are pretty tough price points. So 700,000 and above largely. A few little specks of the $500,000 price point, but playing in some pretty tough price points in a pretty tough market. D.R. Horton, you can see overall absorptions, again, killing it with 4 and 4+ a month, and overall price points you can see here as well. And then last but not least, when you look at the Northwest, Toll Brothers doesn't have the highest price point. Pulte does, but it's driven by their more affordable product in Boise. So part of that's really what's driving it, but it's all in the black, as you can see here. And again, their absorptions are slower, but it's because they're at much higher price points and much bigger margins. The number 1 seller here, Stetson Heights by D.R. Horton. Again, right there in the meat of the market, $17.25. This is a roughly 30-foot wide house, which is tough to make look good, but it certainly is selling well in the low to $500,000 price point. Now the Southeast, number 1, Horton, Lennar, and then followed by MBR at number 3. Again, what does it take? Horton is about 16% of the market share, followed by Lennar and then NVR. And to do that, you can see D.R. Horton down there at number 9 as far as price point goes. And Lennar is almost right there in the middle. And of course, NVR is playing more affordable in more affordable price points with their Ryan series. Looking at overall migration, where do you go? There's a lot of push to the coast in these particular markets. And part of that has to do with just those retirees migrating and moving to the areas they want to go to next. And it's an affordable location for sure. So when we look at Horton and Lennar and NVR, where are they pushing to? You can see the concentration for all of those builders here, sweeping through the core markets and of course, hugging the coast. Overall price points, you'll see overall, most of these price points are sub $400,000. And you can see the absorptions are paying off for that. Look at all the blue and purple selling in the 4 and 4+ a month in these markets. A great markets for growth if you're looking to grow. Overall NVR, you can see, again, all in the blue and purple to the right, all selling super well. And how are they doing it? Sub $400,000 price points. The number 1 project here is D.R. Horton. Once again, that key size 1,500, I'll bet up to 2,500 is the core sales activity, and it's low 3s to mid 4s. Now, as we're getting close to the wrap up, we've got the Southwest with Horton, Lennar, and Pulte in the top 3. How did they get there? Again, when you look at Horton, they're the most affordable of that pack. And then Lennar's right there in the middle as they played their, Lennar tends to play more segmented. And of course, Pulte's in those higher price points once again. And that's what pushes their absorptions, all 3 of those directions. Where's the growth? You can see where the population growth is in these very specific locations. Again, Phoenix has tremendous growth coming from markets like California due to retirees. Same thing with Las Vegas. And then moving into Colorado, again, much of that growth, pretty diversified actually in age groups. I've studied that one dramatically. A lot of growth kind of happening throughout the Denver, Colorado area. When we look at Lennar specifically, you can see overall, or all 3 of them specifically, you can see where the concentration is. Very similar locations for all of them. The big difference is Pulte does not have that same presence in the Utah market. and less of a presence in the Denver market, certainly more opportunity for Pulte to grow there. Overall, Horton, again, it's that sub $500,000 price point, killing it with absorptions, again, pushing their closings up. Lennar is largely, as you look to the south in the Phoenix market and some of that, largely under $500,000. But as you get to Utah, Denver, and Las Vegas, much more diverse and higher price points, and still killing it with absorptions when you look at the map to the right. Overall, Pulte, again, very diversified in price points and doing super well in the Phoenix and Vegas market, but definitely much slower in the Denver market and no presence in Utah. And they have more of a presence in Albuquerque. Top project in this entire region, once again, D.R. Horton takes it. It's 1,300 to 2,300 square feet in the mid 3s to 4s. And that's actually in Utah. And Utah, actually, there's a lot more attached product coming there. And you'll see this one wins by a landslide, close to 19 a month for this community. Very unique for that location. Texas, one of the fastest growing from a population, household growth, you name it. Everybody seems to want to go to Texas. Horton, Lennar, and Pulte take the top 3 here. And how do they really get there? Again, you can see Horton at number 9, Lennar at number 8, and you can see Pulte's a little bit more of the middle of the road here, but largely price points under the $400,000 price point are their average ASPs. The overall growth, it's those key markets, Houston, Dallas, Austin certainly seem to be the big markets for growth here. And as you look at all of those combined together, that's exactly where they're at, is where all that growth is. Houston, Dallas, Austin, and of course, pushing into San Antonio. Horton is largely in price points under $500,000. You can see their absorptions pay off for that. They're killing it throughout all of those. There seems to be a very consistent trend here. Again, Lennar, same thing, a little bit more diversity, particularly in the Dallas market and certainly in the Austin market where you have to push some of those price points there. And again, absorption's really paying off in all of those markets for them. Looking at Pulte, you'll actually see less diversity, much more affordable, largely in that 500,000 and below. And again, paying off in absorption, you have a lot of purple and blue in the Texas market for Pulte. The top selling community, Silverado, D.R. Horton wins it again. Again, affordable, look how simple, again, their architecture is, roof lines and things like that. And that's how they get their price point under 500,000 in that location. Now, as we wrap up, this is the fun stuff. Looking at who could win it for 2024, what does supply look like? And we're just going to do this very briefly. So let's look at the road ahead as we look forward. So when we look at starts, vacant developed lots, and future supply, starts, Texas and Florida once again should win it. Vacant developed lots, Texas and Florida should win it. Interestingly enough, now it's easy to get to a vacant developed lot in Texas, and that could be part of it, but Southwest is number 1 as it relates to future supply. So a lot of activity happening there and opportunity there. Florida still holds number 2. The other really interesting one is California at number 3 and Texas following there at number 4. So very interesting. As we look to total starts and VDLs and future supply for the builder supply, this is also pretty interesting. So Lennar's got a shot at continuing to push to number 1. They've got almost a little over 61,000, close to 62,000 starts for 2023. So that should push into 2024, but it's a very close race with D.R. Horton at number 2. Now, when it comes to VDLs, D.R. Horton has substantially more VDLs. And then when you look at overall future supply, it's neck and neck between Horton and Lennar. So it's going to be a close race between them. But look at Pulte at a very close number 3 on future supply. They've got a very good shot at really, pushing the accelerator and taking at least a much greater lead than they have today when you look at their relationships. So very interesting. And then when you look at overall, when you look at the comparison for those top three by those regions, it is interesting to look at that Lennar leads in 5 of the 8 regions as it relates to starts. So that's pretty interesting. So look for Lennar to increase market share in Florida, and Horton should remain the dominant builder in Texas for sure in 24. When we look at this overall by VDLs, Horton certainly has the lead. They have the most opportunity in 6 of the 8 regions, kind of by a long shot in markets like Florida, the Southeast, even to some degree the Southwest. Texas, a little bit easier to develop, definitely easier to entitle. So all bets are off. You never know what's going to happen there. When we look at overall future supply, though, this is really telling to what could happen and what may happen in the future. Lennar could take it in Florida. They certainly have the most future supply. You've also, Lennar's got more in the Midwest. They've got substantially more in California. They're super aggressive there, an amazing team there too. But it's really interesting when you look at this across markets, who could take it, and could anybody possibly take number 1 away from D.R. Horton? So again, as we talked about, how do you make it to the top 10? Target the highest growth markets and diversify by location. Target the highest demand with affordable home solutions. You guys saw that throughout with absorptions and so on. Target diversity with product and lifestyle. So again, that Del Webb play, having the single family for rent for D.R. Horton, some of those additional pieces really help you to take market share. And then I've got 10 takeaways for you. So top regions fueling growth are in the South, particularly Texas and Florida. Affordably for sure is winning. Texas and Florida represent 62% of the total closings. They just both so happen to be no income tax too. The top 3 builders have unique strategies. Again, Horton offers more affordable detached homes. Lennar offers more EI with minimal choice and options, but more diversity, frankly, in location, product, and price points. And then Pulte offers a variety of home choices, but they also have the lifestyle play with the Del Webb model. Horton's winning in 5 of the 8 regions, as we talked about. Lennar won California, and again, that's the play in product. Don't be afraid to push into those new products as long as you're really good at it. MVR wins in the East with significantly more attached. So if you want to take over more market share there, push your attached market share. It's less expensive, certainly much more acceptable in those markets, and it's almost conventional detached in other markets or small lot detached. The value proposition wins in both the East and the West. So again, MVR has the highest sales rates in the East and Horton has the highest sales rates in the West. Target those sizes, 1,500 to 2,500. It still continues to be the magic size with the highest performance. I think Lennar and Horton remain ahead of the rest for 2024 for sure. I think Lennar and D.R. Horton are in a close race together, though. It'll be interesting to see who continues to win or who wins it for 2024. And then last but not least, this is just a fraction of what we can offer on really looking at growth strategies, what it takes, who's winning, why they're winning. And we'd love to show you what that looks like by comparison and to what you're doing and help your growth strategies as well. So with that, Tim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Molly. And wow, you just showed the power of the Zonda database. That was pretty incredible. Thank you so very much for that. And importantly, you showed something that Allie Wolf is constantly hitting in our national outlook, and that is, pricing under 300,000 has gone the way of the dodo bird. It's just extinct. But 300 to 400,000 in a wide variety of markets has become a sweet spot, and you pointed that out with a number of our builders. And it can be attached, but that price point is fantastic. Now, Molly, notice with private builders, the guys that aren't in the top 10 that don't have that scale, let's talk a little bit about some of the strategies for them, because I want to characterize it kind of in a playful way, and the old saying of how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Right.
Well, in this one, how do you get into the top 10 as a home builder? By land, by land, by land. And for some of the privates, a little bit more difficult because of their capital structure. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing with the next layer down, and not just the top 20, but maybe the top 50 and 70 builders, some strategies they're using to compete in this world with the big guys and to also find the product in the consumer.
It's a really good question, Tim. I would say by land, by land, by land, but I also really believe in density as we move forward. So
Amen.
when you look at the affordable price points as it relates to Horton, Lennar, even Pulte and some of those different builders, they're largely pushing to conventional detached solutions in a lot of the markets. But then you jump over to NVR and some of the other specialized builders, again, not shown in the top 10. And it's really getting to efficient, affordable solutions in attached, small lot detached. I'm always surprised how much attached happens in certain markets when, you have solutions in the detached world, 15 to 18 to the acre that are choices. So I would tell you, I think that's where the movement is going to. I'm seeing, very select specialized builders that aren't in the top 10 do that very, very well. And I think the key for the big builders is they're steering a really big boat, right? So to make those kinds of changes, they're not as well accepted. But imagine if any one of those top 10 were to just get more lot supply by bringing their density up and really mastering some of these new densified solutions, they could win it, and again, I
Yeah.
say win it. For me, win it is not about getting the most closings. It's about getting the most revenue, and that's net revenue. So there really are some interesting things ahead. Certainly there's a lot of different views on how to actually build homes, and we've seen a lot of practices there. I think that's still a ways away for sure, but I think it's in density, Tim, and I think it's doing it right. And I think there's really opportunity for growth, even those that aren't in the top 10 for sure. Certainly those that are in the top 20.
Well, Mollie, as you know, we've used this platform really for the MPC, the Master Plan Community Discussion, which I kind of headed towards in the beginning, but this conversation was really about builders and markets. Give us two markets now, and one you can't mention. You mentioned Minneapolis, which I thought was
Sure.
really interesting. But name two markets for us that you think are opportune. They can be secondary or tertiary. They can be any. But
Sure.
two markets, with an MSA focus that you think will expand significantly into 2025 and 2026.
Sure. I think one of the best kept secrets in the entire country is the Salt Lake market. It's central to the entire US. Lots of growth. It has the perfect demographic that's growing the most, which tends to be more in the family category. So they're growing families, they have to move, and they still offer really affordable price points. So I think that's an excellent one. I think the other one, which is really interesting, and it's certainly known for growth, and a lot of people want to go there. It's really and I'm going to put two markets into one. I know it's probably cheating a little bit, but Raleigh and Charlotte. And when you look at the growth that's happening in, Raleigh particularly, again, affordable price point, great opportunities for job growth. Again, perfect for that demographic that's growing, tends to be more family oriented. I'm gonna throw in a third one, which I really sort of scratch my head on why it doesn't grow more, because when you look at the concentration of jobs in their employment center, it's St. Paul, Minneapolis. I mean, it's crazy when you look at the growth and
You
the
cheated.
opportunity.
I said you can't
I
say
know,
Minneapolis.
totally cheated. I think that's a great one, which
Fair enough.
is why I chose it as my number 3, Tim.
All right, Mal, two quick things before we go. Number one, we had a request about defining future supply when you had that chart showing, VDLs and so forth.
Sure.
So for the audience, define future supply, please.
So future supply is everything. So we track everything down to, it's remarkable the amount of information you can have from our database. But we track everything from whether it is a planned, tentative, or final map. So anything that's on our books as potential future supply, we're tracking everything down to the lot.
Makes sense. All right, Mollie, this is something that both of us have been deep in for a period of time, and that is the expansion of operations, helping builders find new markets. But I want to spin it a little bit, and I'd like your take on the biggest mistake you've seen a builder make, public or private, in finding a new market, the biggest
Yeah.
mistake, so that our attendees know what to stay away from?
That's easy. It's just the biggest mistake is just doing what everyone else did. So it's following what somebody else did without thinking about where your niche is. So if you look at Lennar, they're very good at EI, diversified price points, diversified products. If you look at Horton, they're very, very good in the value series. Pulte, I think, tends to be more segmented, and they tend to do more in a diverse variety of lifestyles and things like that. But I think you have to really understand where your team plays well, grab that niche, and really focus on the markets that are geared towards where your growth will be successful. So, Tim, you and I have done a lot of these market expansions for builders. It's not the same answer for every builder. And I think the biggest mistake is they think it is. So, while this
Right on.
information is super valuable, we want to specialize really, what does that expansion plan look like for your company? What do you do well? And then that's where we're successful in helping you grow.
Molly, that's a perfect place for us to leave off. I wanted to make sure everybody knows we've got that Builder 100 coming up. Please join us. And thank you to the Titan team, Titan Professional. You guys are great partners. Let us know if you have further questions, and Molly and I are available for you anytime. Thank you, everybody. And Molly, thank you very much for the in-depth assessment. Thank you.
And thank you, Kyle Zier, for helping us do all this stuff too. He's a huge part of this, and I just always want to thank him too. We have a
I
great.
agree. Thanks, Kyle. You rock. Take care,
Yes.
everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
And thank you for your help, Amanda. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you too, Amanda.